Welcome back for another deep dive. Uh,
Yeah.
you sent over these excerpts from Ahmed Hulusi's The Truth of Life.
Yeah.
And wow, this one looks like it's going to be really interesting.
It is a fascinating read.
Yeah, Hulusi, I mean, he wrote this back in 1990
Right.
and then updated it in 2013.
Yeah.
But he dives into some pretty deep questions
Mm.
about spirituality and the universe and Islam. And he kind of blends these scientific concepts with
Yeah.
Islamic teachings in a way that really makes you think.
It does. What I find really interesting is how he challenges our perceptions of reality, like right from the get-go.
Yeah.
He introduces this concept of a cocoon world,
Okay.
where he's basically saying that we're living in this very limited bubble, like caterpillars in a cocoon almost,
Hmm.
unaware of this like vastness that exists beyond our senses.
I think we can all relate to that feeling in some way
Right.
of being limited by our senses. Like,
Yeah.
if you think about like our vision,
Yeah.
we can only see a tiny sliver
Exactly.
of the electromagnetic spectrum. There's like entire worlds of light and color that we're completely blind to.
That's right. And he even takes it a step further and challenges our understanding of time.
Okay.
We typically think about our lives in terms of Earth years, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm 30, you're 40, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But Hulusi throws in this like mind-bending concept
Okay.
of the solar year, which is the amount of time that it takes for our sun to complete one orbit around the center of the Milky Way galaxy.
Oh, okay.
And that's a massive amount of time, 255 million Earth years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where like this cocoon world idea starts to become a little bit clearer.
Right.
Like we're so focused on our little corner of the universe
Yeah.
that we completely miss the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
And, when you think about it, our lifespan here on Earth, like let's say 70 years, is just a tiny blip
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of this solar year.
Yeah, it's like 8.6 seconds.
It is nothing, right?
Yeah, it really puts things into perspective.
It does.
Hulusi uses this beautiful analogy from the Quran that compares our earthly existence to like a fleeting sunset.
Okay.
Just imagine watching the sun dip below the horizon. It's beautiful,
Yeah.
but incredibly brief.
Mhm.
That's how he wants us to view our time here on Earth, as this fleeting moment in like a much grander existence.
That brings up a pretty crucial point then that he keeps emphasizing, right?
Yes.
Which is like the importance of preparing for what lies beyond this earthly life.
Mm-hmm.
So, he's suggesting that death isn't the end,
Yeah.
but rather a transition.
A transition to a different dimension.
Okay.
A shift from the Earth's time zone to the sun's time zone.
It's not an ending, it's a continuation.
That's right.
It's just on a completely different scale.
Exactly. And here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
He argues that we're not just passively waiting for this transition to happen.
Okay.
We are actively building our spirit bodies right here, right now,
Okay.
through our thoughts and actions. And these spirit bodies are essentially our vehicles for navigating this next phase of existence.
So it's almost like we're building a spaceship
Yes.
while we're still here on Earth,
Right.
preparing for a journey into a completely different realm.
That's a great analogy.
And Hulusi, he's not really mincing words.
No, he's not.
About the importance of this preparation.
Yeah. Yeah.
He even points to a verse in the Quran
Mm-hmm.
where, those facing death are pleading for another chance
Right.
to come back to Earth and do good deeds.
To make things right. Yeah.
But they're denied.
They are.
There's no coming back,
Yeah.
no reincarnation.
This life, these 8.6 seconds are all we've got.
This is it.
Yeah.
We got to get it right.
He's really challenging that traditional understanding of Islam that a lot of people have.
Right.
The idea of blind obedience to a deity god.
Yeah.
Hulusi's saying, no, true Islam is about conscious choice,
Okay.
individual understanding, and like a deep pursuit of knowledge.
So it's not about blindly following rules.
Uh-huh.
It's about understanding
Yeah.
why you're doing what you're doing.
Yes, and he suggests that the practices prescribed by Islam, things like prayer and deek, they're not meant to appease some external god. They're actually tools for developing our spirit bodies.
Interesting.
and expanding our consciousness.
So it's more about self-development
Yeah.
than about pleasing someone or something outside of ourselves.
Right. And what's fascinating is that he doesn't just stop at the spiritual explanations.
Yeah.
He actually delves into the science behind these practices,
Okay.
like highlighting how they impact our brain capacity,
Okay.
our energy levels even.
That's a really interesting perspective.
It is take ablution, for example.
Okay.
That ritual washing before prayer. You know, we often think of it as just a way to cleanse ourselves physically.
Right.
But Hulusi suggests it goes much deeper than that.
Okay.
He explains that the act of washing actually transmits energy through osmosis, and it neutralizes static energy within the body.
So there's like a scientific basis
There is.
for what might appear to be a purely religious practice.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder how many other things in our daily lives that we might dismiss as mundane or just symbolic actually hold a much deeper significance.
It's a good question.
Yeah. And he even challenges the image of Allah
Yeah.
as this like external entity sitting up in the heavens somewhere.
He does.
He's saying like, no, the true essence of Allah can actually be found within our own essence.
Yeah.
So instead of searching for God in some far off place, we should be looking within ourselves.
He's saying look within.
Okay.
He suggests that by understanding our own qualities and attributes, which he believes are derived from the divine names of Allah, we can actually gain a deeper understanding of the Creator. He even references a hadith that says, one who knows himself knows his Rab.
It's a powerful statement.
It is.
It emphasizes self-discovery as the key to understanding the divine.
That's right. And this also reminds me of another point he makes about humans being vice-regents of Allah on earth.
Which is a huge responsibility.
It is a huge responsibility.
We are all manifestations of the divine.
Yeah.
How does that then impact our interactions with each other, with the world around us?
That's a really important question. And it leads us to another really fascinating concept that he brings up. The Golden Age. He argues that we are living in a very unique period in history because modern science is starting to confirm what the Quran has been saying all along about a single unified existence. So these scientific discoveries, they're actually dismantling this illusion of separateness between us, the universe, and the divine.
Wow, so science and spirituality are like converging.
They are.
And we're seeing this incredible shift in understanding firsthand.
Exactly. And he even points to the fact that the sun is expanding.
Yeah.
Which is scientifically proven.
Right. And will eventually engulf the earth. And he sees this as evidence for a collective gathering of souls. Similar to the concept of like doomsday or mashar that's described in Islamic tradition.
That's a pretty radical idea. But, I mean, when you consider it in the context of everything else he's talking about, it does start to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, he's urging us to move beyond just the symbolic interpretations of religious texts. And really embrace these scientific discoveries as a way to unlock their deeper meaning.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
I'm sure our listeners are already feeling their wheels turning.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a good place for us to pause. Give everybody a chance to digest all these ideas.
Sounds good.
We'll be back soon to dive even deeper into Hulusi's fascinating perspective.
Picking up where we left off, you know, Hulusi, he really wants us to reconsider this very limited view of reality that we have. And, you know, we're so reliant on our five senses, which, let's face it, only capture a tiny fraction of what's actually out there.
It's true. I mean, it's like that old story about the blind man and the elephant.
Right.
You know, each one's touching a different part.
Yeah.
And coming up with a completely different idea of what this animal looks like.
Yeah.
What if we're missing the entire elephant?
Exactly. And Hulusi points out that, you know, our sight, it's limited to this narrow band of light. Our hearing only picks up certain frequencies. So everything outside of that is essentially invisible and inaudible to us.
It's mind-boggling to think about how much we're actually missing.
Right.
Just because our senses are limited.
Yeah.
So if we're only experiencing this tiny fraction of reality, what happens when we die and those physical senses shut down?
That's a great question.
What does Hulusi say about that transition?
Well, he suggests it's like waking up from a dream.
You
know, remember that feeling when you first wake up?
Yeah.
And the dream world, which felt so real just moments ago,
Right.
suddenly it just fades away.
It's gone. And Hulusi says death is similar. You know, this earth that we've been so fixated on, it literally disappears from our perception.
That must be such a jarring experience.
I would imagine.
To have, like, your whole world just vanish.
Yeah.
But then what happens to, like, our consciousness?
Right.
Where do we go from there?
Well, according to Hulusi, while our physical bodies cease to exist, our consciousness, which he refers to as the spirit body, continues to exist within the Earth's magnetic field. But here's the thing, that magnetic field is actually part of a larger magnetic platform that extends from the sun.
So even though we're leaving the Earth behind, we're still connected to the sun, to this larger system.
We are.
It's almost like moving from one room to another.
Yeah.
Not like leaving the house entirely.
That's a good way to put it. And just like each room in a house has its own atmosphere or vibe, right? Hulusi suggests that these different zones, so the Earth zone, the sun zone, they have their own unique timescales.
Wait, so our understanding of time changes too?
Yes.
So does that mean those 70 years on Earth really are just like a fleeting 8.6 seconds?
Well, Hulusi argues that once we transition to the sun's time zone, our perception of time is going to shift drastically.
Wow.
A single year in that zone would equal 255 million years here on Earth.
That's intense.
Yeah. So yes, those 70 years that we spend here would feel incredibly brief.
In that context, it's a pretty profound shift in perspective.
It is.
It makes you wonder if we only have those 8.6 seconds to prepare for an existence that could last for billions of years.
Billions and billions.
What are we doing with our time?
Exactly.
Is that where his emphasis on like these Islamic practices comes in?
Precisely. You know, he sees practices like prayer, fasting, dai as tools for developing our spirit bodies and preparing us for this eternal life.
But it's not about blindly appeasing a deity, right?
Right. No, not at all. He suggests that these practices are actually aligning us with the natural laws of the universe, helping us tap into our full spiritual potential.
So it's less about religious dogma and more about self-development and understanding like the deeper mechanics of existence.
Exactly. And what's remarkable is that he brings in these scientific insights to support these claims.
Like what?
For instance, he talks about how the repetition of Allah's names in dhikr can actually stimulate and activate different parts of the brain.
That's interesting because today we have all this research on neuroplasticity,
right,
which shows how our brains can change and rewire themselves through these repeated actions and thoughts.
Yeah.
But Hulusi was writing about this back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Like long before this research became mainstream.
He was ahead of his time, for sure.
Yeah. And he goes on to argue that by engaging in these practices, we're not just gaining like spiritual merit, but we're actually physically and mentally transforming ourselves.
Yeah.
Building this stronger, more refined spirit body.
Right.
That's capable of navigating the challenges of the afterlife.
Exactly.
He doesn't sugarcoat things either, does he?
No, he doesn't.
I remember him talking about a kind of hell that awaits those who neglect their spiritual development.
He does suggest that if we haven't done the work to develop our spirit bodies, we will experience a kind of disharmony in the afterlife. Not necessarily as punishment, but like as a natural consequence. So you can imagine being fully conscious and aware, but trapped within this very limited, undeveloped form, unable to access the full spectrum of experience.
Not a pleasant image.
It's not.
What does he call that intermediate realm?
He calls it Barza.
Barza.
Yeah, it's like this waiting zone or purgatory. Where we experience the consequences of our earthly actions.
And he suggests that eventually when the sun expands and engulfs the earth, which he kind of ties to this concept of doomsday, our spirit bodies will be released from Barza and gathered within the sun's magnetic field for this final judgment.
That's right.
Now, this concept of the sun playing a role in the afterlife is pretty intriguing.
It is.
And he doesn't present it in like this typical fire and brimstone way, does he?
No, not at all. Instead, he connects it to this idea of ego. He suggests that for those who are trapped in their ego, unable to let go of that self-identity, The sun's intense energy would be experienced as a kind of torment.
So it's not about physical fire.
No.
It's about like the inner state of being.
It is.
So those who have achieved a certain level of spiritual liberation would experience that sun's energy in a completely different way.
Right. It's like having the same external stimulus, but experiencing it very differently based on your internal state.
Exactly. And he even describes this window that opens in the grave.
Yes.
Allowing us to glimpse either heaven or hell. That's right.
While we're still in that Barza realm.
Yeah. And he connects this to the scientific understanding of the sun's immense gravity, which would make a 70-kilogram body here on Earth feel like it weighs 300,000 kilograms on the sun.
Wow. That's a powerful image.
It is.
It certainly underscores the importance of spiritual development.
It does.
I mean, if our experience of the afterlife is so dependent on our inner state, then this light really does become this crucial period for preparation.
Absolutely. But it's not about blindly following rules or pleasing a deity.
It's about understanding why we're doing what we're doing.
He's calling for this conscious, enlightened approach to spirituality. One that incorporates both scientific understanding and spiritual insight.
And he really emphasizes self-knowledge.
He does.
In understanding the reality of our existence as like crucial steps on this path.
Yeah. And you know what?
This approach really resonates with what we're seeing in the world today.
In what way?
Well, there's this growing interest in exploring spirituality beyond traditional religious doctrines and this desire to find a deeper meaning in life.
Right.
And Hulusi's ideas seem to speak directly to that longing.
He's not just talking about Islam, is he?
No, he's exploring this fundamental nature of reality.
Yeah.
The interconnectedness of everything. And this incredible potential for human consciousness to evolve beyond its current limitations.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
I'm sure our listeners are processing all of this, and he even leaves us with this final thought-provoking question, right?
He does.
About sacrificing the ego and what that truly means.
Yes, and he connects it to the Islamic festival of Eid al-Adha, which commemorates Prophet Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son as an act of obedience. But, as you might have guessed, Hulusi suggests that true sacrifice isn't about literal blood offerings. It's about surrendering our ego, our self-centered desires, and aligning our will with a larger purpose.
That's a profound concept to ponder.
It is.
And I think it's the perfect place for us to pause and reflect.
When
we come back, we'll explore this idea of ego sacrifice in more detail.
Sounds good.
And see how we can actually apply it to our own lives.
Yeah.
We've been on quite a journey with Ahmed Hulusi's The Truth of Life.
We have.
He's really given us a unique perspective on life and death and the nature of reality. One that really forces us to rethink what we think we know.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to kind of circle back to that question that Hulusi keeps bringing up about sacrificing the ego.
Right.
It's a concept that can seem a little bit abstract, so I'd love to hear your take on it.
Well, he offers a really interesting entry point, I think, by connecting it to the Islamic festival of Eid al-Adha, which commemorates Prophet Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son as an act of obedience to Allah.
But as you might have guessed, Hulusi is suggesting that the true sacrifice isn't about these literal blood offerings.
Right.
It's about surrendering our ego.
Yes.
Letting go of these self-centered desires that often drive our actions. And instead, like aligning ourselves with a larger purpose.
Right. So it's not about giving up our possessions or even our loved ones.
It's about letting go of our attachment to this limited sense of self.
Exactly.
I'm sensing a connection back to that idea of the cocoon world.
Yes.
That we were talking about.
Absolutely.
Are we sacrificing the cocoon itself?
You're hitting on a key point. To truly sacrifice the ego requires us to step outside of that cocoon world, that limited bubble of self-interest.
And he's arguing that it's about recognizing that we're not separate from the divine.
Right.
But rather like a manifestation of it.
We are a part of it.
This could be a radical shift in perspective for a lot of people.
It can be.
He even uses the word annihilation to describe this process of ego death. Now that word can sound a bit frightening to some people.
Right.
But I think what he's getting at is this idea that we need to dismantle this false sense of self.
Yeah.
This illusion of separation.
That separation is an illusion.
In order to connect with our true nature.
Yeah, and remember that hadith we discussed earlier.
Yeah, one who knows himself knows his Rab.
Exactly. This idea of self-knowledge is central to Hulusi's teachings. He's suggesting that by understanding our own qualities and attributes, which he sees as reflections of the divine names, we actually come closer to understanding the source of creation.
So it's this journey of inner discovery.
It is.
Peeling back the layers of conditioning and social programming to uncover our true essence.
It's a process.
It makes sense in theory.
Yeah.
But how do we actually go about doing that?
Right.
How do we move from this state of ego clinging to ego surrender?
Well, Hulusi offers a number of practical tools for this inner work.
Okay, like what?
He emphasizes practices like prayer dhikr and fasting as ways to quiet the mind, purify the heart, and connect with that inner divinity.
But he's not talking about just going through the motions, right?
No. He stresses the importance of intention and awareness, really using these practices as opportunities for deep self-reflection, introspection, and ultimately transformation.
So it's not about blindly following these rituals.
No.
But it's about using them as a framework for inner exploration and growth.
Yes, and he also places a high value on knowledge and understanding.
Right. He's really encouraging us to move beyond blind faith. Engage in critical thinking.
Absolutely.
Question our assumptions and really seek a deeper understanding of the Quran and the teachings of Islam.
He's advocating for an enlightened approach to spirituality. One that embraces both reason and intuition, science and revelation.
This approach feels incredibly relevant today.
It does.
Especially, with how much information
we're bombarded with from all sides.
Absolutely. It's so easy to get lost in the noise and distractions.
But Hulusi is reminding us that the most important journey is the one that we take within ourselves.
He's urging us to take responsibility for our spiritual growth. To move beyond those ego-driven desires.
Right.
And embrace a more expansive and compassionate way of being.
He really doesn't shy away from the big questions.
No, he doesn't.
He's challenging us to confront our mortality. To reconsider what we believe to be true, and to truly make the most of this precious and fleeting life.
It's been a really insightful deep dive.
It has.
Into Ahmed Hulusi's work.
And I think he offers such a powerful perspective that can really benefit anyone, regardless of their religious background or beliefs.
I agree.
This idea of sacrificing the ego.
Yeah.
Shedding that attachment to this limited sense of self.
It opens up a whole new way of experiencing the world and our place in it. It does. It's a journey of self-discovery that can lead to a much deeper connection with ourselves, with others, and with the ultimate source of creation.
It's a journey worth embarking on.
Definitely. And while there's always more to explore and uncover, hopefully this deep dive has sparked a sense of curiosity and wonder in you, our listener.
I hope so.
And may it encourage you to continue questioning, seeking, and ultimately discovering your own truth.